last night, and he joined me on that program. We like to travel together and do things together, and we've been doing it. He and I and a couple of other people were the first people, the only people ever talking about Agenda 21 for about 18 years. And slowly but surely, things began to come together, and it absolutely exploded. So now we find that we are, we are supposed to be ashamed of ourselves because the American Planning Association, among others, keep printing these articles, absolutely shocked by what we've accomplished, actually stopping hard-working planners and their plans, and we're supposed to be just fringe nuts, and why won't we go away? That's literally what this article for the American Planning Association says. So I attribute that to dedicated activists like you, and I'm very, very proud of what you have done and what the battles that we have going on in the country. And the more that the other side is appalled at what we do, the happier I am. So, obviously, there is a great controversy taking place across the country about Agenda 21 and its policy called Sustainable Development. Why the concerns over what they call local planning? Why do I and others keep talking about the involvement by the United Nations, and why is that a concern? And what's the connection between the two? Well, specifically, there are those in positions of authority who advocate the idea that the planet is in danger of global warming and overconsumption. They say the only way to fix the problem is to control the flow of resources and wealth, which literally means changing human civilization and the way we live. The problem is that that kind of forced transformation necessarily leads to a thirst for power. Have you noticed that in some places? And a top-down control that can eventually lead to tyranny. And that's why I and now thousands of other Americans are so concerned. The standard points made by those who promote sustainable development in its planning processes are these. You've heard these. The American Planning Association says over and over and over again in the document they have called Glossary for the Public, in which they literally say, well, we're getting attacked by all these radical fringe people. We don't want to have them seeing red like some kind of nasty bull, so we'll stop using words like sustainable development and facilitate and most of the words. Basically, you look at the list, it's taken out of one of my speeches, but they don't want to make you see red. But what they say constantly in it is local planning is a local idea. They say Agenda 21 is a non-binding resolution, not a treaty, so it carries no legal authority from which any nation is bound to act. It has no teeth. The UN has no enforcement capability. Planners are simply honest professionals trying to do their job. And all these protests are wasting their valuable time. Shame on you. The main concern of Agenda 21, they tell us, is that man is fouling the environment and using up resources for future generations, and we just need a sensible plan to preserve and protect the earth. Now, what's so bad about that? And again, the American Planning Association says there is no hidden agenda. They say, you ever meet someone of the liberal persuasion who wants to be open-minded and hear what you have to say? And so they will tell you, they go out and get a copy of Agenda 21 and read it thoroughly. What proud Americans they are. And they will come to you and they will say, I've read Agenda 21 and I can find no threatening language that says it's a global plot. What are you so afraid of? Do they really think the UN's going to put in their documents, this is a global plot, pay attention? That's how naive they are. And of course the most often heard response, Agenda 21? What's that? Well, let me begin with some history. And I know you know a lot of this, but I want to bring it all together so that lots of times little pieces and parts get confused and you miss things, and so pull it all together. In 1976, the United Nations held the first of a series of what it called habitat conferences designed to lay the groundwork for international policy on how human society should develop. The report delivered from the Habitat 1 conference told the world that for human society to move forward, it must give up the concept of private ownership of property. Specifically, it said this, quote, "Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice." How many have their own home? You are such shameful people. In other words, if you own land, it's not fair to those who don't. The concept of social justice became the driving force behind implementation of this policy. They tell you over and over again it's about protecting the environment. It is not. Social justice is the main driving force. Social justice, or social equity as it's also called, requires that the world's wealth be shared among those who produce and those who don't. And here's an example of how it works. I got this example literally from of a writing from someone who was promoting this idea. And he was trying to explain what social justice was. And this is what he said. If a person is evicted for not paying the rent, well, that's the law. But if they couldn't pay the rent because they couldn't afford to get a good education so they could get a good paying job, that is social injustice. David Brower, Friends of the Earth, the founder of it, a major UN NGO, said, quote, "The goal now is a socialist, redistributionist society which is nature's proper steward and society's only hope." In short, social justice means a forced utopia with promises of health care for all, jobs for all, housing for all, and equality for all. Just a kumbaya hug, we're all happy. Well, you know, Karl Marx was the first to coin the phrase social justice. That told me all I needed to know about it. The 1976 agreement on Habitat 1 included all of these ideas of policy based on social justice and redistribution of wealth. It was signed into acceptance by the United States by William Riley, who later became the head of the Environmental Protection Agency under George H.W. Bush. Not a treaty. Riley's signature made the Habitat 1 agreement acceptable policy in the United States. After a series of such meetings, finally, in 1987, the United Nations sponsored the Commission on Global Governance, also called the Brundtland Commission. Its report was called Our Common Future. How dare they speak for me about our common future? I got mine, you got yours. Yeah. They concluded that developed nations, such as the United States, were responsible for global warming and poverty, which in turn created an unsustainable planet. The solution was to limit property ownership and economic growth in the United States and transfer consumer wealth to developing nations. Now, last year we had the Rio Plus 20 conference that was to celebrate the accomplishments of Agenda 21 in the last 20 years. One of the main points that they were pushing to get the world leaders and the nations to accept was a massive multi-billion-dollar fund paid for by the rich nations of the world to be redistributed to the poor nations of the world. It was a tax on our prosperity, on our energy use, on our development. Unfortunately for them, the world economy is on the brink of collapse, and all of these rich nations ain't rich no more, and they didn't have the money to put into this, which surprisingly, they seem to find it for everything else, but this time they turned it down. And that's why the last 3 UN conferences have kind of ended in a disaster, because they keep pushing this idea that came up when? 1987. To effectively fight Agenda 21, you must first and foremost understand the meaning and intent of their words. Once you can translate the doublespeak into English, then you'll be able to easily see the hidden agenda in any proposed policy. First, they talk about the definition of sustainable development being development that meets the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Well, the needs that they're talking about aren't human needs. These are those of the planet. The report concludes that the only way to meet them is by eliminating or reducing unsustainable activities globally. These include property ownership, consumerism, high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, roadways, automobiles, dams, pastures, golf courses, and much more. It always gets me with golf courses. Isn't that this beautiful open land? Yeah. But it wasn't created that way by the environment, by Gaia, so we've got to change that. You know? So in fact, this is, they ban all these things. The fact is that the first steps in enforcing Agenda 20 assure that we will not meet the needs of today. Can't feed the people, can't get energy, so their premise, their definition that it's to meet the needs of today and preserve the future, and where in the future are they going to be able to open it up? When does somebody come forward and say, okay, we saved all these assets for the future, it's the future, can we have them now? Nah, there's going to be some future generations. Not if we keep this up. As you read the Brundtland Report, it becomes clear that it is outlining a complete agenda for the reorganization of human society. It clearly calls for reduction in energy use, elimination of certain kinds of foods, including beef consumption. They really hate cows. I kind of like them myself. Yeah. Severe reduction of space for homes and development, and actually the elimination of nation states or sovereign nations, to be replaced instead by a central organizing authority to oversee human settlements. Eventually, these ideas were all worked and reworked in conference after conference, document after document, until they were all came together in one document called Agenda 21 that was introduced at the 1992 Earth Summit. The preamble to Agenda 21, signed by President George H.W. Bush, outlined the clear purpose of Agenda 21, top-down change of our society. It said this, quote, "Humanity stands at a defining moment in history. We are confronted with a perpetuation of disparities between and within nations, a worsening of poverty, hunger, and ill health and illiteracy, and the continuing deterioration of the ecosystems on which we depend for our well-being. However, integration of environment and development concerns and greater attention to them will lead to the fulfillment of basic needs, improving living standards for all, better protected and managed ecosystems, and a safer, more prosperous future. No nation can achieve this on its own, but together we can in a global partnership for sustainable development." Of course, the reason so many nations in the world are so poverty-stricken and people are starving and the economy or the ecology is being destroyed is because of this very kind of policy of top-down control, where nobody can own private property, nobody can do anything on their own until the dictator says you can. But they seem to miss that point. But to put it in simpler words, here's how the UN described Agenda 21 in one of its own publications in 1993. It said, quote, "Agenda 21 proposes an array of actions which are intended to be implemented by every person on Earth. It calls for specific changes in the activities of all people. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all humans unlike anything the world has ever experienced." Have you ever heard a more startling manifesto for the purpose of government? It's terrifying. These two statements encompass the 3 E's of Agenda 21. Equity, economy, and the environment. The agenda is to merge all three together into a top-down control of money and land through a process of redistribution of wealth. That is Agenda 21. In fact, a Marxist author named Ted Trainer clearly described the real goal of Agenda 21 in his book, Transition to a Sustainable and Just World. He said, quote, "The global economy is massively unjust. It delivers most of the world's wealth to the few and rich countries and gears third world productive capacity to rich world supermarkets, not to meeting the needs of the world's poor billions. Rich countries," he explains, "must move down to living on their own fair share of global wealth." But, say your local officials, none of that has anything to do with their planning programs. They're all local. And they accuse me and others of perpetrating a conspiracy theory full of lies and false accusations that their plans have anything to do with Agenda 21. They can really push their lip out and pout. It's amazing. So let's go back to Marxist Trainer. He says, these faults, this terribly unjust world, cannot be fixed within or by a society driven by growth, market forces, production for profit or affluence. Consumer society cannot be reformed to make it sustainable or just. It must be largely replaced by a society with fundamentally different structures. And he concludes by saying this: local planning, is that the American Planning Association? Is that ICLEI? Local planning is based on this theory: you must live on less. Yeah. Proponents of Agenda 21 publicly dismiss the plan as just Agenda 21 is just an innocuous 20-year-old document that has no enforcement power, and they smugly assure us that there are no blue-helmeted troops at City Hall. I love that one. Yeah, right. Or, as the American Planning Association says over and over and over again, there is no hidden agenda. That's why they put out a glossary for the public saying don't use these words anymore. No. In its Agenda 21 Myths and Facts document, founded on the APA website, the group goes to extreme measures to distance itself and its policies from Agenda 21, specifically saying the American Planning Association has no affiliation regarding any policy goals and recommendations of the UN. Really? Well, then it would be very interesting to hear the APA explain this little bit of information that we found just recently from one of its own documents in 1994. And I've got it right here. The document was an APA newsletter to its members in the Northern California area. The article was a commentary entitled, "How Sustainable Is Our Planning?" It was written just 2 years after the UN Earth Summit, at which Agenda 21 was first introduced to the world. The 5th paragraph of this article says, quote, "Vice President Gore's book, Earth in the Balance, addressed many of the general issues of sustainability. Within the past year, the President's Council on Sustainable Development has been organized to develop recommendations for incorporating sustainability into the federal government. Also, various groups have been formed to implement Agenda 21, a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable development that was adopted at the recent Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro." In one paragraph, this American Planning Association document, this organization that has nothing whatsoever to do with Agenda 21, it's just all local, in one paragraph, it brings together the APA, Agenda 21, in the UN's Earth Summit, Al Gore, Sustainable Development, the President's Council on Sustainable Development, NGO groups with the mission of implementing Agenda 21, and the description of Agenda 21 as a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable planning. It sounds like it came verbatim from one of my speeches. Apparently, in 1994, the American Planning Association didn't think Agenda 21 was just an innocuous document with no consequences. They were excited about what it was going to do. But now, because we have pulled the rock away, and we can see the little bugs running around there, suddenly, well, not me, I didn't do that. A couple of paragraphs higher in the article it says, quote, "A common misconception is that sustainability is synonymous with self-sufficiency." Now, where would we get that idea? On the contrary, sustainability must recognize the interconnections between different levels of societal structure. That societal structure is social justice, as described in Agenda 21. Now, if you go on the web and visit www.plannersnetwork.org, which the APA is part of, you will find in its statement of principles this quote. These are your local planners, keep in mind. Quote, "We believe planning should be a tool for allocating resources and eliminating the great inequalities of wealth and power in our society, because the free market has proven incapable of doing this." End quote. The United Nations blatantly advocates that capitalism and private property rights are not sustainable and pose the single greatest threat to the world's ecosystem and social equity. And in its own 1994 document, it shows the APA, the American Planning Association, is helping communities across the nation enforce these ideas while swearing it's all a local idea designed from local input. That, of course, would explain this quote by J. Gary Lawrence. You've probably heard this before. He was a planner for the city of Seattle and an advisor to the President's Council on Sustainable Development, and he said this, quote, "Participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out many who would actively work to defeat any elected official undertaking local Agenda 21. So, we will call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth." End quote. Well, it did bring us out, didn't it? As George Orwell masterfully put it in his epic novel Animal Farm, it's becoming difficult to see the difference between the pigs and the farmers, or the APA and the UN. So, how is it done? How does an international policy slip into our nation and into our community without most people, even your elected officials, knowing about it? Here is the exact course that brought Agenda 21 to America through Congress, through your state legislature, through your local county and city government, and into your backyard. After over 50,000 world leaders, non-governmental organizations, government bureaucrats, and 179 heads of state signed agreement to Agenda 21 at the Earth Summit in 1992, the policy then gained huge momentum in this country when in 1993, President Bill Clinton issued Executive Order 12852 to create the President's Council on Sustainable Development and made it official U.S. policy. Take a look at who served on that council, and you will see many of the same NGOs which helped write Agenda 21 at the UN, including Jonathan Lash of the World Resources Institute. Also on the council, John Sawhill of the Nature Conservancy, and Jay Hare of the National Wildlife Federation, and Michelle Perrault, International Vice President of the Sierra Club. All players in the creation of Agenda 21, now openly serving on the President's Council with the specific mission of implementing Agenda 21 into American policy. And through a series of regulations, executive orders, and grant programs on the federal level, written and pushed through Congress by these same NGOs who helped write Agenda 21, at the international level, the policy has filtered down into state governments, which with NGO pressure pass regulations telling local communities that they must do things like write comprehensive development plans. Then, as your local communities are faced with the task of writing such a plan, and imagine getting this law down, this regulation down from the state saying you've got to put together a plan to decide how your community is going to be developed over the next 50 years. Where's the money coming from? Who knows how to do that? These NGO groups, they know where the money is. They already have a pre-boxed plan that they bring in, including international regulations on development and on energy use and so forth. They walk into your city council or county commissioner's office and they say, don't worry about it, we can help you. And that's what they do. Here's just one federal policy that is being used to implement Agenda 21, is they deny that this exists. This is from the 1998 Federal Register of the EPA's Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program. It says in this report, the Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program is also a step in implementing Agenda 21, the Global Plan for Action on Sustainable Development. So, if your community takes a grant from the Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program, what do you think they're doing with it? They are implementing Agenda 21. It says so right in the Federal Register. Doesn't exist. And still, these same NGOs deny to your face any Agenda 21 connection. So, is there any one group pushing Agenda 21 into local communities? Well, there are actually hundreds of them. Could be thousands, probably. But there is one leading the way above all others. I've talked a lot about the American Planning Association. We, as we began to fight this, targeted a different organization for its very specific purpose, because the American Planning Association has been around a while, and it has a history and an older reputation of just being a planning group. This organization not only has direct ties to the UN, it helped write Agenda 21, meet ICLEI. Originally known as the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, today the group calls itself simply ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. They had to get that word international out of there. That might scare somebody. In fact, they've also purged their website of any mention of the UN. I love that one. ICLEI's mission is to implement Agenda 21 worldwide, and it's having tremendous success. Over 1,200 cities in the world are members of ICLEI, and that includes about 650 American cities, with a goal of over 1,000 American cities by next year. When local governments contract with ICLEI, they agree to implement Agenda 21 policy of sustainable development. That's what they're agreeing to. May not know that, but that's what they're agreeing to. In fact, these local governments are agreeing to much more than that. ICLEI's charter asks in it, as part of the programs that they're bringing into the community, that their individual members, which means the communities that are paying them dues, they're asking them to adopt Earth Charter principles to guide local action. Now, the Earth Charter is an international declaration first introduced to the world in 1997, written by a task force headed by former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev and Maurice Strong, the head of the 1992 Earth Summit, where Agenda 21 was born. The Earth Charter calls for the emergence of a global civil society and states that our environmental, economic, political, social, and spiritual challenges are interconnected. Now, let me give you a parallel here. As constitutional scholars that you all are, you know that we have two basic documents that set what America is. You have the Declaration of Independence and you have the Constitution of the United States. Declaration of Independence tells you what we want. Constitution tells you how we get that. Same is true. The Earth Charter and Agenda 21 go hand in hand. One tells you what we want, the other tells you how we get it. And that's the same kind of thing. For that clearly stated agenda, ICLEI supplies the tools to fully indoctrinate employees at City Hall to assure only sustainable policies are considered. And that's how energy quotas and land use policies are created on a local level. And ICLEI doesn't just stick to City Hall. You may find them lurking around the local school board, helping to integrate into formal education and lifelong learning programs the knowledge, values, and skills for a sustainable way of life. Federal and state grant programs lobbied for and perhaps written by groups like ICLEI spread the agenda even as they deny it exists. This is how the cancer cells are brought into the community. It is the grants, because once the community takes the grant money, then everything is released. They have to follow these rules. Maybe they say they just want to revitalize downtown. Maybe they say they just want to pave the streets down. Ah, says an NGO, we got some money for that. They take the money, they drink the Kool-Aid, and all of a sudden they find out, oh yeah, we'll pave the street, but it's going to be this much more narrow, and you're going to share it here with these bicycles, and if you're going to have any kind of development downtown, you're going to have these restrictions on energy use, you have to use these kinds of building supplies, and blah, 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 blah. That's how the poison comes through, the grants. If you don't take the grants, you can be a free American. Keep in mind, your community does not have to be an ICLEI member to be affected by Agenda 21 and its policies. I got a letter the other day from a lady saying, we can't prove we've got Agenda 21 here because we weren't a member of ICLEI. It doesn't matter. There are hundreds of these organizations and they all interconnect and all work together. Nearly every town around the nation, ICLEI partners with more than 2,000 NGO groups, including the American Planning Association. These groups fan out across the nation and into literally every city, town, and burg in the nation. They are funded by the government grants to spread sustainable development policy. And nearly every town uses the American Planning Association's Growing Smart guidebook that translates Agenda 21 into local policy. These groups work hand in hand with government organizations like the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which has adopted the Earth Charter as its official policy, the National Governors Association, the National League of Cities, the National Association of County Administrators, and more that your elected representatives belong to. When you have someone elected to local office, or at any level, they pretty much automatically become members of a national organization. And as they go to those meetings, what are they hearing coming from the podium? At that podium are these NGO groups. They're telling them, here's the latest idea, here's something we've tried in this community, and here's an action plan on how to do it, and here's sample legislation. And they come home, and the same NGO groups are right there in your town hall, in your county commissioner's offices, and they are saying, oh hey, we're going to help you do this. And your elected officials begin to think, well, this is the proper role of government. This is how it operates. So then along comes you. And you come in and say, these policies you're putting in, this is Agenda 21. What? The UN? You're crazy. And that's why you get that kind of an answer. You've got to put yourself in the shoes of these elected officials. Not all of them are bad. Some of them are just plain stupid. So, and the results of this internationally created, federally funded, and state-enforced assault on your local community and your home. Property rights are disappearing. Energy costs are skyrocketing. Jobs are disappearing. Community development means pack and stack high-rise housing, and bike paths are infringing on roads, making it more difficult to drive cars. Wetlands, conservation easements, watersheds, viewsheds, rails to trails, biosphere reserves, greenways, carbon footprints, partnerships, preservation, stakeholders, land use, environmental protection, development, diversity, visioning, open space, heritage areas, and comprehensive planning are all part of the new language of government. By the way, if you have no carbon footprint, you are dead. Yeah. The funding of legitimate elected government, the function of legitimate elected government within the sustainable system is fast becoming little more than a rubber stamp to create and enforce the dictates of something called stakeholder councils, run by the same NGO organizations that wrote Agenda 21 in the first place. This is the demise of representative government. And the councils appear and grow almost overnight. You'll find watershed councils that regulate human action near every trickling stream, river, or lake. Meters are being put on wells. Special action councils control home size, tree pruning, or even removal. even the color you can paint your home or the height of your grass. Historic preservation councils control development in downtown areas, disallowing expansion and new building. Once the councils are established, it becomes much more difficult to discuss issues with your elected representatives. Instead, they will automatically refer you to the proper council or administration or department run by who? Unresponsive, appointed hacks armed with their own political agenda. They don't care what your complaint is. Regional governments are driven by the NGOs and stakeholder councils. They are run by non-elected bureaucrats that do not answer to the people. Few regional plans mention the potential for property rights infringements or the higher taxes that result, and none of them ever, that we've found anywhere, have plans to offer any kind of protection for any losses like that. Not part of it. As our founding fathers knew so well, the farther government gets from the people, the less responsive it is to their interests. One of the most popular tools now to control energy use is the energy audit and the building review. They establish quotas for electrical use and for heating and cooling pumps and water use. That means that government bureaucrats may come into your home or your office building and determine the amount of potential energy use you should have. Remember the thing about our fair share? There it is. You will be given a list of recommendations necessary to bring your home into compliance. This may include the need for a new roof, new energy efficient appliances, new windows, etc. And to comply, it may cost you thousands of dollars to do that.
You have to buy their stuff.
Have to buy their stuff, and the Energy Star approves everything. Oh, this is a good thing. The appliances come ready-made for this. And there's also, this is the incredible thing. We don't have any money in the federal government. There is a grant program. If you buy new energy efficient appliances for your home, now you've already supposed to be saving money because it's energy efficient. There literally is a grant available you can get reimbursed for having bought them. That is as outrageous to me as buying cell phones for poor people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we have no money. But there's a reason, of course. Getting all of those appliances in compliance serves the Agenda 21. How do they control energy use? Besides that, one way, across the nation, you well know this, power companies in partnership with government planners are forcing the use of smart meters. These meters contain RFID chips, which, by the way, so do the energy efficient appliances. They all read each other. You talk about the machines taking over, they're talking to each other, chatter, 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 and you don't know the language. The technology enables the power company to keep track of how much power you are using and control, regulate, and ration your use of that electricity. There are now policies being advocated to place taxes on the use of toilet paper and on the number of miles that you drive. It is a very big initiative in the Obama administration to get a bill through or to get a regulation through that will charge you for every mile that you drive. Y'all get a state inspection every year for your car?
Not here.
No. Not here? Well,
They get it another way.
they'll get it another way. They're debating how they're going to collect this and how they're going to inspect it. One way is that those states that have the state inspection, you have a meter on your car. And when you go in to get your state inspection, they read the meter, it tells how many miles you drove, and you get a tax bill. They're trying to decide who sends the tax bill and who collects it, but those are just details. The EPA is now providing funding to NGO groups to run training programs for people to photograph and report their neighbors who may be committing crimes against the environment. Last year, Obama signed Executive Order 13575 to create the White House Rural Council. That council is a list of the most aggressive agencies and departments of the U.S. government. It will bring an army of regulators into rural areas to completely control every decision of land use, farming, and development. Sustainable farming practices can only follow strict guidelines set down by government bureaucrats who probably never farmed in their life. They dictate how crops are to be grown, how much energy, water, and fertilizer can be used, even which kind of crops can be grown in some cases. Farmers who have been feeding America for 200 years will not be able to make a single decision without permission and massive paperwork from bureaucrats from at least 25 agencies. This is direct enforcement of sustainable farming, and the result will only be food shortages and higher prices. The governor of Maryland is enforcing an agenda called Plan Maryland that will lock away over 400,000 acres of land banned from any development. One of the key provisions in the policy is to ban septic tanks as a means to protect the Chesapeake Bay, even though there's no evidence that that's ever caused any problems at all. The only result of the ban will be to make it impossible to live in rural areas. Getting people off the rural land and into the cities is the real purpose, not environmental protection. Now, we've said that for 20 years. And then people say, oh, come on, how do you herd people off the rural areas into the city? Well, let's ban septic tanks to start with. Can't live there. Done. That takes care of a big swath. So that's how it's done, step by step. And then if you have to ban the septic tank and people still won't move, well, let's reintroduce some wolves. That ought to do it. Several cities are now taking grant money to create a plug-in deployment program using your tax dollars to assure the city is ready for electric cars. The program openly admits that it's all necessary because otherwise people won't buy plug-in vehicles. Just ask Chevy how the Volt's doing. At least under the free enterprise system, the oil companies paid for their own filling stations, and that was after free Americans made their own choice of what kind of car they wanted to buy. Well, welcome to the utopia of sustainable development. The fact is, we oppose Agenda 21 and sustainable development because it was specifically designed not to protect the environment, but to change the very structure of our government and our way of life. It was designed to harmonize the United States and other free countries into a one-size-fits-all global structure. Through the establishment of the non-elected councils and regional governments, they're creating a government structure that essentially eliminates our precious style of representative government by the people. And they are replacing it with a vicious, backroom, corruption-infested cronyism between non-elected, self-professed stakeholders and non-government organizations who are pushing their preconceived agenda through power-hungry, greedy, or just plain ignorant politicians. The question is, how do we stop it? First, we must understand the nature of the threat we face. The fact is, this is a political movement led by those who seek to control the economy, dictate development, and redistribute wealth. They use the philosophical base of Karl Marx, the tactics of Adolf Hitler, and the rhetoric of the Sierra Club. Basically, everything connected with sustainable development translates to higher costs, shortages, and sacrifice. The danger is in the process. Sustainability policies are being forced on unsuspecting citizens. They use predetermined outcomes and group manipulation tactics to force their way into our local policy. And many citizens are literally thrown out of public meetings by armed guards simply because they want to discuss how a regulation is going to affect their property or their livelihood. Our job is to turn it around on them and make them the focus of the debate. Our job is to turn it around on them and make them the focus of the debate. So what do we do about it? Let me give you first some very specific guidelines and one very valuable tool that we've developed to help in the fight to stop Agenda 21 and sustainable development. First of all, don't say Agenda 21, say sustainable development, not Agenda 21. I know that I've just spent the last several minutes telling you the origins of the policy. I do this to provide you with knowledge about the policy you seek to stop. However, it is not necessary that you dash down to your local county commissioners and breathlessly accuse them of enforcing a UN agenda. That's how we get awarded tinfoil hats and thrown out of meetings for our troubles. Stop that. Second, do not attempt to fight this policy alone. They are very good at ignoring and marginalizing one or two people. You need others to help plan and carry out strategy.
That's right.
And I'll explain in more detail on that. Third, research. Don't even begin to open up a fight until you know certain details. I know all you have done a huge amount of that already, and you know what's going on. It's some of the reports we just heard. You know what's going on, but this is basic. Find out who are the players operating in your town, the people leading the policy. What privately funded stakeholder NGO groups are there? Get to know what you can about them. Other towns that they've worked in, policies that they've spearheaded, where are they from, where do their funds come from. It's important that you know this, and I'll explain in a minute how we can use that. But you've got to know the players. In the little town I live in, Warrenton, Virginia, population about 35,000, there are 17 such organizations operating in that community. And we have the most corrupt government in the state of Virginia as a result of it. But do this quietly. Don't issue press releases about what you're going to do. Ha! We're going to go after these guys. Nah, don't do that. You might have to ask some questions that raise eyebrows, but don't make yourself a target. Stay out of the way as much as you can at this stage.
Right.
Get all the details of the plan being prepared in your community. That's a rain? Wow.
That's the rain.
That's last night.
The earth is unhappy with you. Poor man.
Gaia's crying.
Gaia's crying. Right.
Find out about the local development plan. It's probably already in place. It may be updating it. They're constantly updating. They've got new regulations all the time. You'll probably find it listed on your town or county website. Figure out who specific victims of these plans might be. Who will suffer the most loss? Whose property will be affected? This will help you recruit other citizens to the fight. People who are not here today, who don't know anything about politics, but they find out that their own land or their business or whatever the case may be is about to be affected. Their ears will perk up. They will listen. And if you can present it in that way, not Agenda 21, but did you know that that regulation they're going to do is going to make you spend a lot more money to improve your buildings so that you have to cut back on your carbon footprint? So do you know what that will cost you? I mean, do it from that level. Here's some examples of some issues you can use. Besides that, you may find that conservation easements are being implemented in the community, in the farming community. They sell these to the farmers as a way to save the family farm. And what happens is these lands are then taken off the tax rolls. Well, what happens there? Did government cut back on its size and growth and expense by the amount that they lost in the tax roll? Of course not. Somebody's got to make up the shortfall that's no longer coming in. That's you. That's the ones who don't have conservation easements. Stakeholder groups help the landowners get these easements, and they get kickbacks for it. It's a profit center for them. And they take the easements and they trade them like a commodity among themselves. You never know who's going to hold the easement. Again, in the county I live in, 32% of the county land is in conservation easements. It's a very rural farming county. 32%. Now they sell these as the farmers saving the family farm. You know how many family farms are in that 32%? 2%. Where's the rest of it? Well, we live in horse country. We have the landed gentry horsey people. We have the Dowells and the DuPonts, and we have people from Washington come in, and they like to have their fox hunts and so forth. And they have this open land, and they have found a way not to pay taxes on their property by getting conservation easements. On top of that, they are highly upset by any kind of development that comes in. They helped create a monster called the Piedmont Environmental Council that runs our county. And the purpose of this is, I actually have a quote from an article, a guy who was behind all this. He's a real estate guy there. He actually said, all these new people come here into the community, Well, they buy up these farms and they put fences around them, and they don't even put a gate in the fence so we can ride through on our fox hunts. Aww!
Sorry.
This is the mentality we're dealing with. This, it is Agenda 21. It is coming from there. I mean, that's where, that's what they're using. That's the tools. This is their mentality. Where's their fair share?
Yeah, so much red.
So, these are just a couple of examples of what to look for in your research. Your goal is to stop sustainable development in your community. That means a campaign to stop the creation of non-elected regional government councils that are difficult to hold accountable. It means to stop local governments from taking state and federal grants that come with massive strings attached to enforce compliance. And it means you must succeed in removing outsider organizations and stakeholder groups that are pressuring your elected officials to do their bidding. Here's a fact. These stakeholder groups only have power because your elected officials give it to them.
Yeah.
If they're not listening to them, if they don't have an ear to them, they can dry up and blow away. I don't care how much money they've got or how many other political connections they've got in your community. They can do absolutely nothing if your elected officials refuse to listen to them. So if your elected officials won't listen to you, get rid of them and get some who will. That's the way to kill the power of this whole thing. So, civic action. To start with, just for your own peace of mind and for, so you can say it later, the first thing that you should do is try to discuss it privately with some of your elected officials. Maybe you know some people who are in office. Go down and sit down and talk with them. Discuss the effects of the policies on the average citizen. Explain why they are bad. Again, the policies. Don't go rushing in there with Agenda 21. Stay focused on the local issue. Only very slowly, if necessary, begin to back up a little bit and say, well, see, it came from here. It came from we had a state policy, we had this federal policy, we've got these non-government organizations. You know who they are, Mayor. They are, the ICLEI and the Nature Conservancy and Sierra Club and, the Piedmont Environmental Council. You know who they are. Well, here's what they're planning. This is what it's about. You can back up that way, and you still haven't mentioned Agenda 21. Begin, and if that meeting doesn't go well, and it probably won't, then the next level is to take it to the public. Begin a twofold campaign. First, write a series of letters to the editor for the local newspaper. Make sure that you are not alone. I'm going to say that over and over and over again. If you do it by yourself, you're marginalized, you're out of there. If you have it organized from the beginning, I'm going to write a letter to the editor on this issue. And I need 5 more people to write a letter backing me up, maybe bringing out another aspect of it, maybe even bring up another issue. And you have them coordinated, that they go out. There will then be answers to you. Some agree, some attacking you. You need to fight back, and by attacking back, this is where that information that you gathered on the NGOs comes in. This is where you begin to say, did you know this group, they're not from our town. This group is a California group, and here's what they did. They were in Florida, and they were here, and they were there, and this is the policy, and now they're trying to do it to our community. And you know who funds them? And if you have that kind of information, you can completely discredit them. And make sure that any of them who attack you, that you've got more people to write in and say, that's wrong, I support Mary here who wrote this, to, keep it going and keep that. Don't let them get the upper hand. Second, attend council meetings, commissioner meetings, and ask questions. The response from the council members will determine your next move. Now is the time to write a news release outlining your concerns and finding out about the policies. Pass the news release out, not just to the news media, but if you go to a city council or county commissioner meeting, pass out the news release to everybody there. Chances are the local newspaper isn't going to be behind you. Maybe they won't print your news release. How are you going to get it out to people? You got to pass it out yourself.
That's right.
Be sure to organize people to come with you to these meetings. Don't try this alone. If necessary, have demonstrators outside City Hall carrying signs or handing out flyers with the name and picture of the officials who won't answer your questions along with the questions you ask. I'm going to explain in a minute how you do that. The point in all this is to make the issue public. Take away their ability to hide the details from the public. Expose the hordes of outsiders who are dictating policy in your community. Force the people you elected to deal with you, not the army of self-appointed stakeholders and government officials. Shine a very bright spotlight on the roaches under the rock. And if the newspaper is with you, great. But as I said, if they're not, there are other things you can do. You can deliver the news releases to them, into the public. You can get signs, maybe even flyers in stores if possible. And keep it up as long as it takes. Don't stop the public demonstrations until you've acquired victory or at least started a public debate. The final step is to use the energy that you've created to run candidates for office against those who have ignored and fought you. Ultimately, that is the office holder's worst nightmare and may be the most effective way to get them to respond and serve as their constituents. Now, as I said before, I know you guys are experienced. You've done a lot of these things, and so you know how to do this. Now, it's time for some new tools and some new tactics. Here's an undeniable fact. Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, cannot be enforced without usurping or diminishing private property rights, period. So, we need to begin to challenge the plans that affect private property rights. However, as we move in that direction, we must have a clear understanding of what property rights are. Many people today have little or varying ideas of property rights. And, 40 years ago, most people understood things like no trespassing, my home is my castle, step across that line and suffer the consequences. Such ideas today seem quaint, antiquated, maybe even violent in this day and age. How dare you stand there and defend your property? Especially with a government that's invading private property at will. The idea of keep out is almost unheard of. That's why, to demand that your private property be honored and protected, a definition must be established before you start the effort. We've created property rights definitions. These are based on some of the Founding Fathers' quotes, but there are things in here that come basically from the writings of John Locke. John Locke influenced the Founding Fathers to create the Constitution, so we figured that property rights definitions from John Locke would match what Thomas Jefferson had in mind. Things like the owner's exclusive authority to determine how private property is used. Boy, there's a concept, huh? So we have that. Now, these definitions can be established to be used as guidelines for drafting legislation and resolutions in state legislatures and City Hall. Too many anti-Agenda 21 bills are being written without the definition, rendering them toothless. If you put together a law that says, Agenda 21 is banned in this state and we're going to protect private property rights, what have you accomplished? Nothing. Because the other side never uses the term Agenda 21, they'll say, oh, this is just local. And property rights, what do you mean? Define it. Define what you mean by Agenda 21. Put in the bills the actual programs that you're talking about, the grant program. And a major piece to it is that you will not take grant money that advocates Agenda 21. And we actually, and you can be more specific than that, but we just saw the EPA's own grant challenge program specifically says that. So that's a major one. Now, to use the definition to the utmost, I've created a new tool for you to use right here in a city or county. It's called a Resolution to Protect Citizens' Property Rights.
Wow.
Now, all this does is, what do you hear from government all the time now? Transparency in government. That's what we want, transparency. Well, this one says that if planning is going to involve and affect my property, you'll bring me into the conversation. So I'm at least involved. Gee, there's a radical concept. And it goes on to describe property and so forth. I mean, it's very non-radical. And here's how you use this. Today, what we do is we get that 3 minutes, city council, county commissioners, and we rush in breathlessly saying, you're imposing Agenda 21. You're putting in an international UN policy in our community. Now, standing behind your county commissioners are the NGOs. I thought that was it. And standing behind them are these NGOs, Sierra Club, ICLEI, and American Planning Association. Guy's nuts. And of course, this is the first time the county commissioners have heard it, so they look at that guy's nuts. However, go in this way. Your 3 minutes. Gentlemen, I just have a question for you. As you're bringing these plans and these planners into our community, what guarantees do I have that will protect my private property rights? Now, you've just asked a question that every property owner in town wants the answer to. And you haven't mentioned Agenda 21, and you haven't even attacked planning. You just asked them a question. And I absolutely guarantee you that they will stand up and say, oh, of course we will. Of course, I have it on videotape, they do this. Of course we will. Hey, I'm a property owner too. Of course we'll protect private property rights. And you just smile and say, I'm really happy to hear you say that, but I'd like to have it in writing, please. Now watch their mouths drop open. I had a lady do this as my guinea pig in Southern Virginia against a county commission that she'd had a very adversarial relationship with. And she agreed to go in and do this. And she went in, and she started out by saying, gentlemen, I'd like to have a new paradigm of relationship between us. You know?
Very good.
And she said, so as you bring these plans and planners into our community, I just want to know, what guarantees do I have you'll protect my private property rights? And they all stood up. Of course we will, of course we will. I'm glad to hear you say that. I'd like to have it in writing, please. And she started to read it. She gets about halfway through it, and she said, well, we'll take that under advisement. She said, okay. So she comes back the next week. Well, gentlemen, I gave you that resolution. What do you say? One of the commissioners got up and says, I can't sign that document. Can I ask why? Well, I think there's a bigger agenda going on here than just that document. Well, can you tell me what that is? And he said, I don't want to get to debate with you about this, but I'm not going to sign that document. Well, I don't want to debate you. Just what is it that you find offensive about this or difficult you can't sign? I told you I'm not going to debate you about this, but I think there's a bigger agenda going on here. You know. Now, first of all, when she went up there to deliver this, she told me, after all these years of being up there with them, for the first time, she felt empowered because she wasn't going to bring up Agenda 21. She was coming at it from a different angle. Second of all, she began to read it. She said they looked like deer caught in the headlights. Oh crap! They figured this out. You know? So I was talking about this at a Tea Party workshop in Richmond and explaining that. And I said, so now what do we do with this? Well, eventually we're going to run a campaign against this guy who has taken up this position. And what do we say about him and what he's done? Well, he's got some kind of wacky conspiracy theory against protecting property rights. You have just flipped the issue. He's got the tinfoil hat. You just want to know, property I bought, are you going to defend it or not? That is a winning position. And that's how this is used. Now, again, do not do this alone. She did, and it never went any farther. But she was doing it as a favor because I want to see what would happen. Here's what you do. You have 10 people there. And you get up and you do this whole presentation. And at the point when they say, no, we won't sign it, you ask a very radical, earth-shattering question. Why? Well, we're just not going to sign it. Now, your other 10 people get up. Why not? I want you to sign that. I want my property rights protected. Why won't you sign a document that says you'll protect my property? What are you afraid of? What are you hiding? What's in these plans that you don't want us to know about that you're going to take our private property? And then the issue goes. Now, the next time you come in, you do it again. But outside, you now have 25 or 50 or how many people you can get together with signs with their picture, their name on it, saying, why won't you sign to protect my property rights? And you just keep doing it. These guys will run for the hills. They don't, and the NGOs are going to be there trying to tell them, well, it's okay, it'll go away. It'll go away. Never quit. Keep at it if you want to win. Keep doing it until you've at least created a public debate or you've got a victory. So, Now, I've got all of what I've just told you in this little booklet that we created, including the resolution, including all the plans on how to use it. I've got a few of them left here. They're $6 a piece. Couldn't do it for free, but it's all right here. And you can also order it from our website, so I just want you to know about that. So, let me just conclude. Nameless, faceless bureaucrats wielding power in the back rooms, untouchable and unseen, is not freedom. Agenda 21 proposes a global regime that will monitor, oversee, and strictly regulate our planet's oceans, lakes, streams, rivers, aquifers, seabeds, coastlands, wetlands, forests, jungles, grasslands, farmland, deserts, tundra, mountains. It even has a whole section on regulating and protecting the atmosphere. It proposes plans for cities, towns, suburbs, villages, and rural areas. It envisions a global scheme for healthcare, education, nutrition, agriculture, labor, production, and consumption. In short, everything. There is nothing on, in, over, or under the earth that doesn't fall within the purview of some part of Agenda 21. But we who oppose it frankly don't accept the premise that we must destroy our human civilization in order to protect the environment. We believe in free markets and free societies where people make their own decisions and develop their own property. And we fully believe that the true path to a strong protection of the environment is through private property ownership and limited government. Those who promote Agenda 21 do not believe in these ideals, and so we will not agree on the path to the future. In short, our fight is a clash of the age-old philosophy of life, freedom to live as you choose or control by an unseen few. And there's very little room for middle ground in that. The United States has never been part of a global village in which the rules for life have been handed down from some self-appointed village elder. We are a nation of laws that were designed to protect our rights and our property and our individual life choices while keeping government reined in. We oppose Agenda 21 precisely because it is an agenda to transform our nation into the exact opposite view of governmental control. I know that many of you get discouraged. You feel helpless. You believe that we have lost our precious republic. But to those of you who have engaged the battle and felt loss, please do not despair.
Thank you.
Do not hang your head in defeat. Be energized. Every action you take, successful or not, helps to expose these lies, and that's why they fear you. In cities and towns across the nation, real opposition is beginning to stir. Thousands of Americans have now engaged in this battle. Already more than 150 cities have entered their membership in ICLEI. At least 7 state legislatures have passed anti-sustainable legislation, and even the Republican Party has included anti-Agenda 21 language in its platform. A revolution has begun, and if we can maintain our freedom, if we can maintain our freedom in our community, we can do it as a nation. The fact of the matter is, this is D-Day, we are on Omaha Beach, and we're moving inland. We fight sustainable developments to stop the erosion of our liberties and our way of life and to restore the American system of government and justice, and we are starting to move the rock of freedom uphill. And so, for the first time, since I started down the road to expose Agenda 21, I can clearly see that if we stay vigilant and vigorous, if we refuse to hang our heads in despair, and if we take the offensive, we will succeed in crushing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for bringing that message to us today.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of Tom before we adjourn?
I love the way you pointed out how they mastered incrementalism on every level to get it advanced this far. And what your strategy is doing is mastering it back at them.
Yep.
Because the most frustrating thing for me in politics and policy is people get this deer in the headlight looks
Yeah.
And they won't battle it out in bits and pieces, understanding what they understand at this point.
You know, they have all these
They're not
technical
thinking.
terms that nobody ever heard before, and they
Yeah.
think, oh, that guy's an expert.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
So
just
what?
kind of an average citizen. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But if you keep it focused, that's fine. You know, that's fine to have that program. I'm not saying not to have that program, but I'm saying, how will it affect my property?
Right.
Please tell me
Very
that.
simple.
And somebody said to me that when we first put this booklet together, they said, Tom, aren't you worried that you're giving the other side our tactics? And I said, no. I will stand there and give them one and tell them the question's still the same. They're the ones trying to hide what they're doing, not me. And my question is, what will you do to protect my private property rights? And I will go through this entire thing and still come back to that and say, I ask you again. That's it. It's one question. So, yeah.
Is there any relationship between the law of the sea treaty and the 21?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The law of the sea treaty basically gives the United Nations control of all the seas. Not only that, they have now expanded it to rivers, tributaries, things that feed the oceans. That now becomes part of it. And both Bush and Obama were putting things together from the U.S. side to, mesh in together with that. Absolutely.
I have Agenda 21 from Glenn Beck's book, and that kind of puts it into a story.
Yeah.
I know it's made up, but it's scary. It'll scare you to death.
Well, it extrapolates out where it's going. Yeah.
Right, and it's an easy read.
Yeah. I would love to get.
If anybody wants to read it, I can bring it next week.
I'd love to get a graphic that shows the cities of the future, where you have these massive high-rises and all around windmills and all that. I mean, just to see what the structure of a community will look like. It's just a horrible-looking thing.
Well, they feed them these little tablet things for their nutrition, and they have to create their own energy, and it's just bizarre.
Yeah.
They take their kids.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I love about the way you go about this, God bless us conservatives, I think one of the biggest downfalls we have and the biggest strengths we have is our passion. So we go in, face forward, and we say something, and before we know it, we've said something that appears to be crazy, even though it actually
That's because you know the
sense.
background to it and they don't.
Right,
Yes.
and I like how you're basically using language against them. So like when we go, right, so like it can actually be something that can translate not only to us, but to others. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's the
There
point.
is something not right.
You know what? Liberals have property too.
You got it. It's universal.
Yeah. So, all right.
I have another comment. People keep talking about it being Soviet in nature and Marxist in nature. I have a sister-in-law who was born and reared under as an atheist in the Soviet Union, and now she's a conservative Christian here. But she was here 2 weeks ago, by the way. But one of the things I learned from her is that even under that Soviet situation, they were motivated by, they were given special things to motivate them.
Sure.
So it's still
Human
human
nature.
instinct. It's still there. And so it's bogus. It's a bogus assumption
Of course it is.
that people will just share for the good of sharing.
Well, that's the fallacy of the whole
For
philosophy.
their families.
Yeah. That's the
Yeah.
fallacy of the whole philosophy, and that's why it fails.
Yes, it's a
That's why it
failure
fails.
option.
I don't know how many, we were talking about this last night, how many times does socialism have to fail before these idiots figure it out?
Yes.
We came to the conclusion, there's no end.
Yeah.
Because they know better. These other guys didn't know how to do it. We do. You know.
I have two more questions, but I don't want to.
The fundamental rights that our founders built into the Constitution was really based on property rights, and that's something I think you've seen, you brought this to light here as the linchpin of what we can do about this thing at a local level. That's really great. And
I truly believe that if we do this on the local level, if we rise up there and protect our rights there, it will filter up
Yes, right.
to the state and into the federal level. I don't think we're going to accomplish it by going after the federal. I mean, we have to keep fighting that as well,
You're right.
but this is where the main battle should be.
Yes.
brilliant.
Can you make the connection between the education and the Common Core and Agenda
Oh
21?
my gosh.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. The connection is that the way that you get this complete transformation. I mean, take a look at basically your Tea Party movement. We're all about the same age. There aren't very many young people involved. And so it's those of us who learned in school the ideals of America and our history and that sort of thing. And all that is being robbed. And as we were talking about earlier, the way that you completely transform the nation into this kind of view is to steal a generation of children. And that's what Common Core is about. It takes away, they will know nothing about the Founding Fathers, nothing about our history, nothing about the failures of socialism around the world, all that. And so they need, that's like a rear guard action, the education side of it, to make, they're kind of sitting there biding their time. All those guys are all going to die out eventually, but we got whole generations coming up here that pretty soon we'll win it out. Yeah. So, but the greatest the thing that's happening that they just can't, it just drives them crazy, homeschooling.
Yes.
Yes.
I want you to take,
They can't control it.
envision a meeting in the future where there's 100 people trying to make huh?
They are going to control it with.
Well, that's true, and that is one of the major dangers of Common Core. But envision a meeting of the future when 100 people are trying to make a decision, and 10 people in that meeting, or 5 people in that meeting are homeschooled, and the rest of them are all public school. All the public school kids, people, adults, are standing there with their hats on backwards, going like that, and the homeschool kids go, "Follow me." That's my hope for the future.
Me too, yes. One of the things that this appeal, local elected officials, any elected official, they always feel this pressure to get the money for their people. And this whole agenda, I hate to use that term, is to lure them into the program by promising money. And on a local level, we all know some of the people that are in local and county government are there because they're someone's friend or relative, and they're filled in a space, or they've been allowed to run, and they don't have the wherewithal to figure it out. And we're flooded with that in government. We have people from all walks of life. But just that simple information about the property rights, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out.
It's my home.
You don't have to be brilliant.
It's as low to the common denominators you can get. Yeah, and that money thing.
Yes.
They get as many people on the need for that money, whatever level, whether it's a government or an individual or whatever, because that creates a constituent for that money. So now they're having all this debate in Washington to cut the budget. And what's happening? Everybody, you can't mention a single issue. We cut money here because there's a constituent for their screaming bloody murder. No, not my money. And then the news media starts running articles about how they're going to suffer, and so, yeah, I mean, there's nowhere they can cut the budget because every one of these things has got them hooked on it. So, yeah.
No one remembers the 30s anymore.
All right, I've got my book up here. Now tell me I was wrong. That I wrote over 15 years of articles I wrote on the issues of education.
What is that?
Huh?
The other book?
This one right here.
Oh yeah, he's got another.
It's on. It covers education, it covers illegal immigration, it covers Agenda 21, the United Nations, the environmental movement, and personal privacy rights. Things I wrote for over 15 years where I was either derided or ignored, and then all of a sudden I started seeing editorials in newspapers saying exactly what I said. So I titled the book, "Well, now tell me I was wrong." So that's and we've got it's $20, and we've got the booklets up here too. And the newsletters, please take those and sign up for my email list, if you will.
Yes.
And all that. Thank you very much.
Email this.